Hello everyone, I hope you're all keeping well, healthy and happy. A few people have asked me to comment on the ongoing situation in France as it stands presently, especially with these ongoing elections that they've got. Now, here's the thing about France, and nobody really wants to admit this at the moment, but France is already in a state of full-blown crisis. It is in the crisis period that I spoke about in one of my previous videos. According to a Pew Research poll that was conducted back in 2013, and this was prior to the mass influx of migrants from predominantly Islamist countries or countries that are very much on the road towards an Islamist theocracy, 42% of young Muslims in France between the ages of 18 and 29 support suicide bombing. 42%. That is a massive number. Okay? When you have almost half of that population in favour of the terrorist activities of ISIS and other groups such as that, there is a very, very real problem on the ground. We've also seen the burning down of cities and the destruction of property and these riots that have been happening right across France as well, along with these terror attacks that have taken place and have become almost a daily occurrence in France. And this is a very real problem. Now, the left in France has not been able to deal with the situation, or perhaps does not want to deal with the situation more accurately, because their voting bloc, their voting base, the people that vote for leftist parties tend to be from migrant populations or people that are already indoctrinated with cultural Marxism. And so for this reason, they rely very heavily upon those voting blocs to retain their own power structures, their own power bases. The institutions, the establishment there in France depends on that. Now, what we've seen more recently is the rise of a populist candidate, Marine Le Pen, who is standing against that very idea and those ideologies that are perpetuated by so many people on the left and by Islamists and so on and so forth. And this is good because it means that there is a bulwark to rage against the system. But here's again the main problem. There are already a myriad of migrants in France from these Islamist theocracies or countries that have very, very strong Islamist leanings that are in favour of implementing those ideas and ideals and ideologies in France. What are you going to do with them? That becomes the question. What do you do with them? You cannot deport every single person. That's not possible. Why is it not possible? Well, because that would cost a lot in taxpayer money. Right? Now, even if right this moment, if all migration in France was to stop, if Marine Le Pen comes into power, let's say, in the best case scenario, and stops all migration, that still doesn't solve the problem. Okay, it still does not solve the problem that is already existing in France. Okay? It exists. And there is no direct solution to that, in that sense that people think. Voting for Marine Le Pen will not solve the problem. What it will do is buy the French people some more time to combat the issue itself, right? Now, according to statisticians like Nassim Taleb and others, it doesn't take a great deal to shift the direction of a country. You only need about 10% of the population to be in favour of any sort of political change, and you'll see it move in that direction. And that's exactly what's happening in France at the moment. In fact, you've got a bulk of the population in France now that is very much in favour of the EU. Right? Because they've been brought up on this steady diet of cultural Marxism. Not enough people are rejecting that ideology. And you've got this frontrunner right now in France by the name of Macron, who has garnered a lot of support from people that were leftists. He is part of the establishment, as it were. Right? He's sort of run on the same platform in some ways as François Hollande. And he is the natural successor in some regards. But his platform is a globalist platform. It's a platform that demands no borders. It's a platform that a lot of people are in favour of. In this first round of election results, the ballots that were cast, he came in beyond expectations. He came in with more votes than Marine Le Pen, right? And so that's the frontrunner at the present time. And this is a guy who has some very, very questionable links with some very interesting banking cartels. He's got some very questionable links in terms of his political leanings and ideologies. And his personal history is rather questionable as well. Okay? Who is this guy? He came literally out of nowhere. He came out of nowhere and got mass support. Now, anyone who's studied political science knows that there is no such thing as a grassroots movement. There is no such thing as a grassroots movement. Never happens, never will. Right? So somebody's backing this guy. Somebody's been promoting this guy. Somebody's been propagandizing this chap. And then when you look at his personal history, the reason I mention this is because it's of absolute relevance. You've got his marriage to his former teacher. Okay? His former teacher is 24 years his senior. And she appears to be the person that gave him the indoctrination to become the man that he is with the ideas that he holds. Right? And they met when he was 15. And they became officially involved when he was 17. Right? Now, I got into an interesting discussion about this with someone on Facebook and was promptly unfriended and I think blocked as well as a result of questioning this unbridled support for Macron and his wife. Because here you have a teacher who was grooming a young student, okay, who was predatory. That's what you've got. And it's all very Manchurian Candidate. It's all very Manchurian Candidate in terms of this rise from nowhere. Okay, last year no one knew his name. That's something to think about, right? But he comes in and suddenly there's this wave of magical support out of thin air. What is that all about? And of course he's championing these globalist ideas. And you see these people that are predominantly feminists and predominantly socialist in nature also applauding this relationship that he has with a woman who is 24 years his senior. Now that marriage completely broke apart that first marriage that she had. And she had children. Right? What does that say about a man's ethics? Granted, he was a young man at the time. In many countries, he would be considered a child at the age of merely 15. Right? But what does it say about someone who's willing to get involved with a married woman with children and then subsequently marries her? What does it say about his wife? The fact that she was predatorily sort of waiting for him to reach the age of consent, if what they say officially is true. What does it say about them? Now, maybe it's just me because maybe I don't understand French society, right? Maybe I don't understand French society. Maybe this is okay in France. But in most other places, most other situations, this might be considered statutory rape. It could well be a case of statutory rape. Now, if a man was to do this, he would be in prison for it. Okay? He would be in prison for such a crime. But in this instance, both Brigitte Trogneux and Macron are being applauded for this relationship. And this seems to be a constant thing on the left. I don't want to go into a rant about the left necessarily, right? But it seems to be a constant issue where when a woman commits a crime, it's okay, assuming this was a crime. Now, this may not have been. Maybe she did, in fact, wait until he reached the age of consent. But it's still pretty damn sleazy. Right? And people's personal ethics matter, even in politics. This is why people judge them on their personal lives. Because it speaks volumes about what their political beliefs are going to be as well. Now, if you take a look at the best leaders the world has ever known, those people were very staunch in their moral principles. The worst of leaders were always morally dubious, whether it's Caligula or whoever else. Right? And it's no accident that this is the case. It's no accident at all. Because personal morals translate to your personal politics, and then to the politics that you imbue during your time in power. So, in this situation, there are things that people should be questioning, and they're not. And this friend that I got into a kind of a spat with, inadvertently as it was, right? It made me realize the fact that so many people support immorality. So many people support immoral actions. So many people, because they're so invested in their political ideologies, don't even want to look at the fact that they themselves may be morally compromised in their beliefs. They don't want to do that. It's too hard for them to look at that and say, hey, you know what? Our morals are compromised. The same friend, by the way, that I was talking about, was very much in favour of mass migration and helping migrants to come into countries. Right? Now, I was reading an article today. Let me read this to you. 4-year-old girl among refugees raped in Greece as thousands of asylum seekers trapped in camps. Children resorting to selling survival sex in desperation for shelter and money to escape. The article itself is pretty harrowing. A psychologist at a camp in Athens told researchers we had a case of a 4-year-old girl who was raped. And there are other instances of these. This isn't a one-off thing, you see. This happens a lot in these camps. It happens a lot. And, you know, people just dismiss it. And, you know, it makes me wonder whether there is a scintilla of morality left in this world. It truly does. Smugglers in Greece and Italy and France are known for forcing refugees, including children, into prostitution to pay debts, whilst migrants are also resorting to survival sex for food and shelter or to raise money to leave Greece. I mean, this is a reality. And they don't want to accept these facts. They don't want to accept what the hell's going on. Right? They just don't want to. Instead, when you're trying to debate an issue, right, these leftists, what do? They start blocking you. They start unfriending you. Instead of spending a little time thinking in their brain to think, okay, do we have any moral ground from which we can approach this? Do we have any points with which we can counter the points that are being put across to us? They don't do that. And it's no skin off my nose, right? It's no skin off my nose. Why am I spending time talking about this? It's no skin off my nose. It's a problem because this is a mass epidemic in society. This level of ignorance, this level of absolute degeneracy Okay? Where people are excusing the immoral actions of other people that are destroying the lives of children, of men, of women, right across the board. This is the way the left perceives things. And it's absolutely disgusting that they keep excusing these kind of immoral actions every time they happen. Now, in some instances, maybe you can start going, well, there's a reason why this happened with one particular individual, or if it's a one-off crime, if it's an exception to the rule, fair enough. But when you have statistics upon statistics that show so many instances of certain things happening, and at each turn you keep excusing them, then that's a form of delusion. Okay? It's a form of delusion. Getting back to Macron and his wife, let me tell you something else about this. Female predation, female perpetrators of child abuse are at record numbers. Yet no one wants to talk about that. Okay? No one wants to talk about that. Every time that there's a case of some female teacher or trusted adult abusing that trust, every time there is a case of a male child being either sexually, emotionally, or physically abused, they don't want to talk about it. Anytime there's a female child, like in this instance in Greece, and granted, Greece isn't France, but the same things have happened in France, but anytime this happens, because the perpetrators are migrants, they find ways of excusing them. Like, it's okay, it's part of their culture. That's abhorrent. That's abhorrent. That's what we're putting up with in today's age. It's a real problem. And then you have this batch of other people, and you'll see how this relates to France in a second, but you have this batch of other people that just don't give a damn about anything. Right? They're kind of nihilistic. It's like, hey, it doesn't matter. Just let it all burn. And it's like that Batman quote, some people just want to watch the world burn. They don't care, they're too ignorant to understand what's going on. And you know, people are inculcated with all these crazy ideas. And people are manipulated to such extent that they can't see through the bullshit. That's what's really going on here. The whole of the human race is right now suffering from a form of insanity. A form of mental illness. You've got people that are indoctrinated with religious ideologies. And all religions, by the way, are made up by the same people. Right? And by religions, what am I referring to? I'm talking about the forms of religion that we have today. Because keep in mind, every anthropologist agrees that religion's evolved. But at a certain point in time, and I've detailed this in many previous videos, whether it's modern-day Islamism, whether it's modern-day Christianity or Judaism, okay, the modern-day variants of these religions are not the original religions themselves. And I've explained in detail, in intricate detail, why this is the case. These are a modern creation, and at each turn, what happens is that the people that control these religions as either a money-making scheme or as a mind control mechanism are inculcating their ideas into everyone else to spread hatred and immorality and wrong action. Today's religions are as satanic as Satanism is. That's the truth of the matter. And it's not just religions, by the way. It's not just religions. It's political ideologies that have become like religions. Now, you can scream facts until you're blue in the face. You can tell everybody the truth about something. You can tell them the facts around something. And they will still ignore you. You tell them to try and take the wax out of their fucking ears, and they don't listen. And there's a reason they don't want to listen. Because they are choosing themselves to live in ignorance. And how does this relate to France? Well, that's exactly what happened with France. In fact, France is the birthplace of socialism. Not a lot of people know that. France is where the whole damn thing began, for God's sake. The political revolutions that took place there were engineered. And that's where these ideologies first started to form. And then they moved forward into other countries. But socialism doesn't work. Right? Socialism does not work. At what point are people going to accept that? Because Vladimir Lenin said himself, socialism leads to communism. The end goal of socialism is communism. And what do you have in France right now? You have two parties. It's interesting. It's interesting to me as well. This is another interesting point. Marine Le Pen, right? Marine Le Pen, people think, and the publications in France, the mainstream media in France, calls her right-wing. They call her a right-wing candidate. Now, if you've studied the policies of Marine Le Pen, and this is one thing that concerns me greatly, but when you look at what she's standing for, her policies are actually far left. It's just a form of nationalism taken to an extreme coupled with socialism. And the last time we saw National Socialism, we saw the results of that. And the same thing's true across the board, by the way. We've got these British elections going on right now. I know this is a video mostly about France, right? And the fact that France is in chaos, because it is. There's no saving it, by the way. Even if Marine Le Pen was to get elected, you could not save France. Let me say that right now. France is beyond saving. The same is true of most other countries as well. Because even if you reduce immigration to absolute zero, you're still left with the now inherent population that came in as refugees, as migrants, who don't want to assimilate, who don't want to integrate, who don't want to do any of those things. They want to keep their own culture and they want to enforce it upon everyone else in the host country. But the UK is facing a similar kind of thing. I mean, people talk about the Conservative Party and the Labour Party and this paradigm, this dichotomy between the two. It doesn't exist. It's a false paradigm. It's a false narrative. In fact, Peter Hitchens made this brilliant point. He said that the Conservative Party is actually a leftist party, and he was lambasted for saying that, but it's absolutely true. Today's Conservative Party is not far right. It's not on the right. It's completely on the left, because the centre ground in politics has changed so much. Because everything swung to the far left. Now anything just slightly right of Stalin is considered right-wing. That's insane. But these are the insane times that we're living in. So where is France going in the future? France is going nowhere. France is sunk. Even if it leaves the EU, you still have a problem. And it won't be solved. And what's going to end up happening is that it will erupt into civil war. That's it's already happening, for God's sake. There is no saviour figure that can save you in this situation, in this instance. That's the problem that France faces. And like I said, voting for Marine Le Pen might buy you a little more time if you are willing, as a population in France. The people of France would have to be willing to stand up for what they truly believe. They would have to shed the old paradigms. They would have to stand up and recognize their own sovereignty, that no government on earth has a right to dictate to them who they are and what they do. No individual, no religion, no nothing has the right to dictate that to them. But they're not doing that. Okay, they're not doing that. And it's not just the French people, it's everyone. So if you were to ask me about the whole world and where this world is going, it's going off the edge of a cliff is where it's going. And I'm sorry if that depresses you, but that's what's happening. Because people don't want to take their own self-sovereignty seriously. They don't want to do the psychological work on themselves that they need to do. They don't want to do the hard work of thinking. They want easy answers. And when they don't get them, they become petulant like children. Just like this friend I was talking about. They become petulant and they throw their rattles out the pram. Right now we're dealing with a population of intellectual pygmies. And all they can do about it is complain. You say to them, come up with a solution for a problem, they don't want that. All people will do today is complain all the time. They have nothing to offer the world. They have nothing to offer in the way of, well, here's a solution. Maybe I'll start with myself and become the solution. They don't want to do that. And it's infuriating. But then sometimes I think, let me be honest about this. Sometimes I think, what is the point of me being on here? Is it even worthwhile? What is the point of trying to teach people when they refuse to learn, when they want to be infantilized? That's another problem, by the way. People want to remain children. They want to remain as infants. And what is the proof of this? Take a look at the health and safety rules that we've got in the UK, and I don't know if you guys have them in the States right now, but that's an example of it. The nanny state is another example of it. People want to wrap themselves up in cotton wool. Safe spaces in universities, that's another example of it. Okay, you're afraid of words today. This is what's happened. You're afraid of conversations and dialogue. You're afraid to defend your own beliefs or points or ideas with strong arguments if you have them. And if you don't, then you run away. People are cowardly. This is the crux of the bloody problem. People are cowardly. They don't want to talk about things honestly anymore. So if you ask me about the direction of Europe, it's not a good one. And it doesn't take much for somebody like a Hitler to come along and purge people. Okay, because those kind of... See, there's two types of people in this world, right? Who are very knowledgeable, by the way. There are people like me that would much rather try and educate people, but even I'm getting close to that point of snapping and saying, well, you know what? I'm washing my hands of you all. Okay? And then there are the other type of people that go beyond that and want to commit mass genocide. How many people are there that come along trying to teach people, that try to educate them, that try to push them to think slightly differently, beyond their own paradigms? A lot. How many people have come along? How many people do you see on YouTube, right, as commentators or as presenters or whatever else, right? All these brilliant minds that we've got. And they're all trying. They're all pushing you to learn, 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 try and become better than you are, adopt some form of moral compass. But no. Maybe humanity is too infantilized to learn. Maybe they're always going to be stuck in a perpetual state of infancy. I don't know. The problem is that when that happens, the conversations end and the violence begins. And then there's nothing but blood and guts. And that's the kind of civil wars that you start seeing breaking out. Violent revolutions. If that's what you all want, then who am I to stop you? If you want to rip each other apart, if you want to cut each other up, why should I stop you? If you want to commit heinous actions on others or excuse the heinous actions of other people, why should I stop you? That's all I've got to say on this matter. And I'm sorry if this has been depressing, but do you know what? The world we're living in is bloody depressing, I'll tell you that. You look at the state of things and you think, what happened? And I guess the answer is that what happened was that the lunatics took over the asylum and then established their own set of rules that were completely Looney Tunes. And that's what happened. Anyway, thank you for watching. Take good care of yourselves, and God bless you.